Back, you're watching the Jacksonville History Show. Our guests are Jack Chambers and Jim Rinaman, who were involved with the Local Government Study Commission that led to the creation of the Consolidated Government, which took office October 1st, 1968. Now, we're talking about 1968, just to put it in perspective. President Lyndon B. Johnson announces he will not seek or accept nomination for another term. Martin Luther King Jr. is slain in Memphis. Senator Robert F. Kennedy is assassinated. 60 Minutes, the CBS News magazine, airs for the first time. The rock musical Hair opens on Broadway. In the Heat of the Night wins the Oscar for Best Picture. The Beatles win a Grammy for Best Album of the Year, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The cost of a first-class stamp, 5 cents. And Jacksonville launches a new consolidated government. Well, the Beatles actually came to Jacksonville, too. They were very, very big, and we'll take a look at a picture that shows them arriving at what was then Jacksonville's airport. I think this might have been before the new airport was opened.
It was.
But there they are. It was an interesting time, 1968. Good, bad, and ugly. And we'll continue our discussion now on consolidation. Let's talk about the heroes of this dramatic change in local government in Jacksonville. Jim, who would you mention?
Well, you could start with Daughtry Towers in 1935, who got the constitutional amendment that made it all possible, and then was unable to get the people to vote for it.
Which kind of helped make what happened in the 60s possible.
Right. And then chronologically, I think Jack Matthews as a senator and Fred Schultz as a legislator, he became the Speaker of the House and Jack became the President of the Senate, and they probably had more to do it than any other legislators. Claude Yates, of course, did the Yates Manifesto, and that all came together. And then Jack Daniel and Lex Hester became the key people in the study commission and in moving it forward. But as Jack Chambers pointed out earlier, by that time there were thousands of people, most of the business community really, and business and professional community, had come together in favor of it.
Jack, anyone you would add? You mentioned before we started the show Lex as a key factor, not only in getting consolidated government created, but subsequently.
Right. Well, I guess I wouldn't add anybody, with one exception, but I would underscore Lex's contribution, not only then, but over the years to Jacksonville. I don't think anybody made the contribution to life in Jacksonville and Jacksonville government that Lex Hester made. He was the one who really came up with the consolidation plan overall, put it together. Then he served for 8 years as Hans Tansler's chief administrative assistant and did a wonderful job of pulling all this government together and making it work in the first place. And later he came back and was chief assistant to Ed Austin when Ed was mayor, and was one of the principal assistants to Mayor Delaney.
What about the media? What role did the news media play in this?
Well, of course, Channel 4's investigation produced a lot of the information for the grand jury. In my opinion, I'm not privy to that, but I think that's what happened. And they came out with a lot of information about wrongdoing in government, which was one of the reasons we decided to press forward with a charter instead of just a report and later a charter. We decided to do the charter and the report at the same time because public sentiment had been so molded by Channel 4.
Another hero I neglected to mention was Hans Tansler. He was in a very interesting situation because in May of '66 he was elected as a reform mayor, and a number of new city councilmen came in who became very important parts of this consolidated government. And Hans then had to decide between May and August whether to endorse consolidated government or not, because if he did, he had just finished running in the 37 square mile city, and if consolidation passed and he wanted to be the mayor of the new consolidated government, he was going to have to run county-wide within a year. And so he did do that, and it did work out, but it was a very big decision for him to make, and it was very important.
Talk about the racial dynamics of this movement. After all, we're talking about the 60s, which was, race was a big issue, and there were people who were concerned about consolidation, that it might prevent blacks from electing a mayor in the old city. Right. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we were very attentive to that, and we created districts to be sure that at least 3 districts would be majority of blacks. And we also had an up-and-coming young lawyer, Earl Johnson, who was a part of this movement and who ran at large, and all of the consolidation people supported him. So that when the first city council sat, I think they had 4, and that was an extremely big move in the right direction. Ever since then, we've been able to maintain at least 4 and often 5 blacks on the city council, which I think has been very good. And of course, we finally came to the point where we had a black sheriff, and so I think we've grown up a great deal politically.
So you might include Earl Johnson in that list of heroes as someone who might have seen himself not too many years down the road as mayor.
And I'd add one other name to it. A few years after consolidation passed, we had a community meeting of 100 community leaders at Amelia Island, which is often referred to as Amelia Island meeting, to talk about the community and what our needs were. And I think Sally Mathis played a very significant role at that meeting. I remember a long dialogue between Sally Mathis and J.E. Davis, which was one of the really touching moments I've ever heard in public life.
And you ought to include in that Mary Singleton, who was also on the first city council and very, very persuasive.
And at least the first set of office holders, the mayor and city council, they were concerned about the race issue, and it was something that they focused on and tried to deal with.
I want to catch up on this Amelia Island Conference in 1974. That was convened by Fred Schultz, who was chairman of the chamber at that time. 100 people were invited, a very big cross-section of the community, go to Amelia Island, spend 3 days. And they came up with 10 priorities, the things we should do in order of priority. Education and downtown development were very high on that list, transportation, a number of other things. But out of that also came the creation of the Jacksonville Community Council, Inc., JCCI, and Leadership Jacksonville, Inc., which was designed to perpetuate what Jack was talking about earlier about the citizen participation and input and involvement in government. And it's worked out very well. We've kept hundreds and hundreds of people involved over the years that wouldn't have otherwise been involved because of JCCI and Leadership Jacksonville.
I'd like to have both of you, Jack, you first, speculate. Here we are in 2003, 35 years after the new government took office. How would Jacksonville be different if consolidation hadn't happened?
Well, that's pretty hard to speculate. Consolidation has been a reality for so long, I've never stepped back to think of that. But I think we would not have prospered the way we have. I think our political problems, no one should diminish the number of problems we have now in local government because the community is growing, our roads are falling behind. There are always a lot of problems. If there weren't problems, government would be moving too fast. But I think that the number of problems we'd have would have been magnified greatly. One thing, we'd have a core city with a small tax base. Think what's happened to downtown. What would have happened to your tax base?
Some annexation might have occurred, maybe not.
It never
failed 3 times in a row in the 60s.
I don't think annexation would have occurred, and I don't think that the county government could possibly have coped with the growth that's occurred, particularly along the J. Turner Butler corridor, but also in Mandarin, in other sections of the city, the county.
Yeah.
In 1968, the Constitution was amended to allow home rule for chartered counties and for municipalities, which we never had before. The only powers they had was whatever were granted by the legislature. So I would suspect that if we kept the city the way it was, we would have, under that new Constitution, sometime in the 70s, created a chartered county. And we would have had a half-baked consolidation with the city of Jacksonville probably fighting all the way, much the way the city of Miami and Dade County fight.
Well, we've got one other picture that we want to take a look at, and we were mentioning heroes. There are a couple of them in this picture. This is burying the time capsule in 1968, and there's Hans Tanzler and J.J. Daniel. And not too a short time ago, we unearthed this capsule, and it was there was a great deal of water damage and so forth. One thing we learned is not to bury a time capsule too close to the river. But those two people did play a key role in what was going on in Jacksonville local government. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit more about J.J. Daniel, Jack.
Well, Jack Daniel was certainly one of the business leaders. I think he'd been an attorney, then he became a business leader at the time of Consolidation.
And later became publisher of the Times-Union.
I was going to say that, right, exactly. And he certainly was an outstanding individual in any terms. And while we're talking about heroes, one other name that we missed, didn't play the role of some of these others, but I'd like to add Ted Grissett to that. He was the vice chairman of the Local Government Study Commission, and he was the first chairman of the City Council.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jim, one of the factors that led to consolidation was corruption, wrongdoing in government. What kind of safeguards were built into the new consolidated government to prevent this from occurring?
Well, we prohibited city employees from doing political activity on city time, which had been world famous in Jacksonville. The Burns Blitzers were composed of policemen and firemen who went out on city payroll and ran the state for Hayden Burns. And we also created checks and balances between the mayor and the city council. The mayor had executive responsibilities. We set up a system similar to the federal government where we had an executive officer that was in charge and was responsible as the mayor, and a city council that was responsible for legislation, for budget, and for oversight, and it's worked out very well.
We want to thank Jim Rinaman and Jack Chambers for being with us on the Jacksonville History Show. And if you're watching this show before October 3rd, we invite you to a special program on consolidation, 6:45 p.m. October 3rd at Old St. Andrews on A. Philip Randolph Boulevard in the Alltel Stadium area. For more information about Jacksonville history, please visit our website, www.jackshistory.com. So long, everyone.